Today's group of organisms we're going to learn about are birds. Their class is aves, and aves, you can think of like aviation, aviator, all has to do with flight. So it kind of makes sense that the birds are in class aves, and we are still part of the phylum Chordata. Here are the 6 characteristics of birds. Now, the ones that I am circling, make sure that you leave some space after because we will be adding some things about each of those. So birds are going to be creatures that have feathers, wings, beaks. So those are some of the classic external structures that we see. And then they also have a lightweight skeleton, lungs with air sacs. And then they also have endothermic metabolism, which is different than the reptiles, and we will look at that more specifically. We and birds are endothermic, meaning we are going to regulate our body temperature from the food that we eat. And this is kind of what I had talked about in the reptile video, that we and birds have to eat far more often to continue to keep our body temperature stable because we control it. The reptiles, they rely on their environment to maintain their body temperature, and they don't have to eat as much or as often, when birds and mammals have to eat far more. Now, birds honestly will have a little bit higher metabolism than mammals because of the flight that they have to power. And so the fact that they are flighted animals and they have to go into the air and sustain that for long periods of time, they have high metabolism. The organism with the highest metabolism is the hummingbird. So endothermic metabolism is, essentially warm-blooded, keeping body temperature constant from the food that we consume, so within. One unique characteristic of birds is that they have a lightweight skeleton, and this is because they have hollow bones. Now, they're not totally hollow like a straw, but you can see in this image up here, this zoomed in image here, that it is far more porous and hollow than our bones are. And what this allows for is the less that they have in their skeleton, the lighter their body's going to be, and that's going to help with flight. So their bones are thin and hollow, but they are more rigid, so they're still more stiff than a reptile's bones. And another unique feature is in the bone, their breastbone, because of how large their breast muscles are for powering flight, they have to have a really big breastbone to have that muscle attached to. Then one last really interesting feature about birds is they do have a 4-chambered heart like we do. So they have that third ventricle finally got completely divided and is now 4 complete vessels for blood to flow. But in their lungs, they have improved efficiency for oxygen intake. And this is through these things called air sacs. So really similar lungs to us, except they have these extra air sacs, which allows them to basically get oxygen constantly instead of we take in oxygen and then we breathe out carbon dioxide and then we take in oxygen. And when we are breathing out carbon dioxide, we can't simultaneously be taking in oxygen. But birds have these air sacs. So if you look here, you can see this yellow arrow is the air getting pulled in through the mouth and down the trachea. So they're pulling in oxygen into those air sacs, and they're filling up their lungs. And then when their lungs exhale the carbon dioxide from the lung itself, those air sacs also deflate, pushing more oxygen into the lung. So they have a pretty continual cycle of fresh oxygenated air coming into their lungs, which makes them super efficient at delivering that oxygen to the cells to power their muscles for flight. So for reproduction, birds have internal fertilization. So the male is going to fertilize the female internally, and then she will produce an amniotic egg with a hard shell. So reptiles had kind of a more leathery, softer shell, still watertight, so it's amniotic. And then they will lay those and they will care for them with external development. Birds are very nurturing as parents. They have to feed their young. The young rely very heavily upon the care of the parents in order to develop and be successful in life. We're going to look at two kind of categories of birds and some of the subgroups within those. So we'll look at terrestrial versus water, so aquatic and terrestrial, and then within their different groups. So for terrestrial birds, we have perching birds. This is going to be like our most common classic bird that we see often in our yards: robins, blue jays, blackbirds, finches, etc. They perch on stuff and they're called perching birds. Then we have birds of prey, which are also pretty common around here. We see hawks and falcons and things like that. Eagles, they have talons, sharp beaks because they are hunting, more predator type birds. And then we have the flightless birds like the ostrich, emu, etc. Those are birds that are terrestrial, so on land, but cannot fly. And this does not include penguins because they are considered a water bird. And so then we have the aquatic birds here. These are the diving birds, which are the penguins. The water birds are going to be like ducks and things like that. And then the wading birds are things like heron and the cranes, etc., where they just kind of wade in the water and try to catch their food. Those are the groups of birds, and that is the end of our bird notes.